Recalling isn't the sexiest topic to discuss in League of Legends. It isn't flashy, doesn't feel super impactful, and won't be in a montage video. The truth of the matter that every high elo player knows though is that almost the entire point of the laning phase, from trading, wave control, etc. are all a massive attempt at getting better and more efficient recall timings over your opponent. If you don't understand the foundations of a good recall, then even if you master all the aforementioned concepts, you will be unable to gain consistent leads in your games. Which is why in this guide, we'll be covering the basics of achieving a good recall timing. And although this will be ADC focused, most of the concepts here will be applicable to all roles if you happen to play in other lanes. Let's get into it. The very first advice people give when it comes to recalling is simply to make sure that you push your wave into the enemy's tower before you leave the lane. As you should know by now, if you crash a wave into the enemy tower, then it will begin pushing back towards you. What this means is that when you get back to lane after your recall, the wave is stacking up, pushing to your side of the lane. Thus, you can farm it safely and not miss out on too much gold. The major reason that crashing the wave is the most common tip though is simply because it completely guarantees that the wave can't be frozen against you. Avoiding a freeze is by far the most important thing you need to consider before recalling, especially early on. But why is that? It's pretty simple. During the early game, bad lane stays and missing experience are relatively much more impactful than later into the game. There's two major reasons behind this. One, there is less vision on the map. Players haven't placed as many control wards yet. Supports don't have their warding items upgraded yet. Vision is scarce, making enemy jungler ganks that much more frightening. Returning to lane off of a recall and coming back to a bad lane state can very easily lead to your death, with very little to be done about it. 2. As we said, missing experience is much more relevant during those crucial early levels. Just think about it. The difference between a level 3 and level 4 champion is much more staggering than the power difference between level 13 and level 14 champions. A wave freezing away from you is one of the worst ways of getting denied experience apart from just straight up dying. Thus, you want to try and avoid that at all costs. Going back to what we originally said, the whole point of crashing your wave into the enemy's tower before basing is to avoid the disastrous freeze. Understanding that is what can make you adaptable in how and when you take recalls though. Basically, if the wave isn't freezing away from you, you might just have a recall timing you can use to your advantage. Let's show you an example of what we mean. The early game for our dear friend Draven this game did not go as expected. Generally, you want to be the one scoring kills as the Draven, but due to a poor 2v2, he ends up going down to Kai'Sa. After respawning and walking back to lane, we can see that Kai'Sa has already done the standard play of crashing the wave into Draven's tower. When she gets back, she's going to be able to cash in on all these minions that Draven has to push in right now. On top of that, she's up a full pickaxe over Draven. Things aren't looking too hot for him. But despite being alone, Draven does actually manage to finish clearing off the enemy wave and begins to recall. This is quite smart by him. Let's move the camera over to Kai'Sa's POV. Why do you think Draven is doing this? If you immediately thought about the even minion rule, give yourself a pat on the back. Although Draven couldn't cleanly crash his wave into Kai'Sa's tower, 5 caster minions can't be frozen this close to her side of the lane. It is guaranteed to push back to Draven, nullifying any threat of a freeze, thus granting him the opportunity to get a free base timing here. It is important to note that if Kai'Sa had understood this, she could have easily walked up, dragged the wave, and put it a bit closer to the center of the lane. Draven's reinforcing wave would arrive before all the casters died, which would invalidate the even minion rule and a freeze would have actually been threatened. In that case, Draven would have to immediately cancel his recall to stay in lane. But because Kai'Sa didn't follow through with that tactic, Draven gets a free base and manages to buy at least a call. He's still at a disadvantage, but at the very least he's not as weak as he was before and he's coming back to a wave he can farm. We highly encourage you to immediately begin thinking about the even minion rule more often when it comes to finding recall timings. Knowing when the wave is guaranteed to push towards you can help you get out of a sticky situation, but more importantly, it will also help you figure out when you have opportunities to deny recall timings as well, as the Kai'Sa could have. The next crucial detail when it comes to recalling is planning items based on your foreseeable income and thinking ahead. To do so, we first have to be able to predict how much gold we're going to earn in order to properly plan base timings. There's 2 reliable sources of income you can expect during the laning phase. One is obviously from minions and the other is passive gold generation. If you don't know, you earn around 2 gold per second in the game. With some simple math, you can be sure you'll get 60 gold every 30 seconds or 120 gold every minute. Definitely good info to keep in the back of your head to help plan out future recalls. As for minions, here's a chart for how much gold you'll earn if you last hit every minion in wave. For standard non-cannon waves, you get 105 gold for last hitting all 6 minions. For cannon waves, you just add 60 gold on top of that and you'll earn around 165 gold. Cool, so let's see how to apply this information. Here's all the context you're going to need in order to answer the following question. Here's Kai'Sa's and Twitch's current items. If you were the Kai'Sa and you had 875 gold as she does, how would you be planning your future recall in order to dominate the lane? We'll touch on why we're obscuring Twitch's gold in a bit as well. Before moving further, we'll just clarify this. Everything we're about to discuss will always be relevant for planning out recalls. It doesn't matter what is currently being built on ADCs or how items may change, the concept remains the same. That being said, the immediate thing you should have thought about is how Kai'Sa is about 350 gold away from her Kraken Slayer. That's a huge spike and something she should instinctively be playing for. Let's do some quick math then. Minion waves come in every 30 seconds, so an easy way you can think about things is like this. The incoming wave plus the passive gold you'll earn while waiting for it will yield about 165 gold, not enough for Kraken Slayer. What about 2 waves? That'd be around 390 gold due to the second wave containing a cannon plus these minions that are still around, and Kai'Sa will absolutely have enough gold to buy Kraken Slayer. Unless she of course misses a ton of creeps, but at this point with this much AD, that's highly unlikely. Therefore, a simple strategy is to just slow push or even fast push the next 2 waves. As long as she can recall for a big spike, that's all that matters. But we're about to run into one of the most annoying problems when it comes to self-reflection in regards to recalling. The problem is that in solo queue, your opponents suck and decide to randomly reward you. Clearly, this wasn't a great all-in by the enemy Twitch and an even more questionable flash away from the Kai'Sa, but let's see what happens next. We're on the second wave and Kai'Sa can still play towards her recalling win condition, but she's going to stay due to the low health Twitch. When giving up a good recall timing, you always have to ask yourself, can I realistically gain an advantage by staying here that's worth more than an item spike? In this case, the answer is no. Twitch with Yuumi is incredibly safe under his tower and restoring health. Honestly, the only way he could possibly die here is if... Yeah, hopefully you can see why things like this are so frustrating. We know that randomly being rewarded like this just encourages players to keep making bad decisions, particularly in the lower elos. Looking back, there's absolutely no way Kai'Sa could have known that she'd get a kill here. Twitch has a ton of waves he could easily farm at his tower. Predicting that he would go in like that is absurd. A high elo player would instantly recognize that and take their item-based recall timing. By doing so, they get a guaranteed lead over their opponents instead of hoping that their opponent makes a random mistake. Okay, so thinking about your own future item spikes and preparing to recall for those items is key to your success, but you can get a little fancier than that if you really want to push big leads solely through recalling. Remember how we masked Twitch's gold? Obviously, you don't have access to that information in an actual game, but you can easily make educated guesses about how much total gold your opponent has based on their CS and kills. As we saw, Kai'Sa and Twitch had the same amount of kills, so you don't need to calculate anything there. Kai'Sa was up 29 CS at this point in the lane though. The average gold per minion is around 20, therefore she could estimate that she had around 600 more total gold over Twitch at that time, which happened to be not too far off from the truth for a quick estimate. Why do we bring this up though? Well, it's important to base on your own item spikes, but knowing what your opponent might buy as well can drastically impact your decision. In this specific game, Kai'Sa was guaranteed a lead through this knowledge. She knows she has more total gold than Twitch. If she bases on exactly enough gold for Kraken Slayer, then there's absolutely no world in which Twitch could match her mythic item purchase. He not only had less total gold, but he'd also invested in tier 2 boots already. By basing at the precise moment she got enough gold for her spike, Kai'Sa would guarantee a mythic item advantage during the laning phase. When Twitch would match recalls with her, at best he'd get a pickaxe on top of what he already has. Let's think of another simpler example. Imagine you're playing Jhin in this matchup and you're at about 25 CS and sitting on about 800 gold. The enemy Jinx is down 5 CS compared to you. Trying to crash the wave and force a recall timing would be an excellent choice in this scenario. Jhin could purchase Executioner's Calling, whereas Jinx gets maybe 2 longswords or at the very worst a pickaxe when she bases. Based on the lane matchup, even though Jhin doesn't actually have a gold lead, with an item-based recall he'd actually be winning the lane, since Executioner's Calling is a big counter to Soraka lanes. Estimating what both you and your opponent can buy off your recalls is definitely a more advanced topic when it comes to recalling, but we figured we'd introduce it here. We'll definitely go further into that in another guide. Now for our final piece of advice. This is something that plagues so many low elo players and causes them to throw countless games just because they don't know any better. Do not, under any circumstance, mess up an early recall timing to help your team with their random calls, especially dragons. Let's show you just how disastrous things can get by doing so. Here we have a low elo Samira with an Alistar dealing with a poke lane. Things go rather well for them as they happen to find an all-in while their Elise was coming in with a flank to gank. A 2-for-1 trade is incredible, and now Samira is in prime position to snowball a lead. That is until Elise calls to start the dragon, which compels Samira to instantly ditch the wave to help out. You should know due to the even minion rule that this wave is going to push towards the enemy Kai'Sa since it's closer to Samira's side of the lane, which means that leaving it unattended is going to have dire consequences. Let's watch what happens. It takes her around 25 seconds from leaving lane until she and Elise have finally slain the objective. Not only that, but during the early lane, players tend to not buy boots, which makes the walk back to lane very slow. Over a minute of game time has passed since Samira left the wave and finally got back to lane. In total, she missed 2.5 waves of experience by leaving the wave pushing away from her to help at dragon. Just moments after Samira hits level 5, Kai'Sa does as well. Not only that, but Kai'Sa is actually ahead in experience since she has more minions to farm. That's completely unacceptable considering the free double kill Samira just got. Messing up basic recalling concepts is a huge issue in low elo and costs a ton of players so many games exactly like this. There were definitely consequences to Samira's actions as well. Although she still had a gold lead, experience is a huge source of power during the early game. With a good outplay, Kai'Sa and Zyra were able to decisively win a 2v2 fight, which put them right back into a dominant position within the game. An outplay that wouldn't have even been possible if Samira had played correctly, as Kai'Sa and Zyra shouldn't have been even in experience. So just to make things perfectly clear, before level 6 or level 7, you need to make certain that you get clean recalls off and avoid potential freezes. Ignore random dragon and jungle skirmishes if your wave is in a bad spot. You likely have to recall after those types of engagements, and you don't want to miss out on huge chunks of experience for no reason. Alright guys, as we said, this was just an introduction to the fundamentals of recalling. We'll definitely be going over more advanced concepts later on. And remember, if you want to improve fast and get the rank you've always wanted, then check out SkillCapped.com, link in the description below. Otherwise, you know the deal. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get more premium guides with one goal in mind, helping you become a better player. As always, thanks for watching and catch you in the next one. Cheers!